Good afternoon and welcome to IBA News this Thursday, the 1st of December and 1st of Kislev. I'm Elon Astan-Levy and we're live from Jerusalem. The Nazareth District Court today handed down a 5-year jail sentence to 2 Arabs convicted of planning to carry out Islamic State-inspired attacks against Israelis. The two, Mohammed Sharif of Nazareth and Mohammed Rajala of Yafia, were members of a local ISIS terror cell. Together, they monitored several army bases in Migdal HaEmek and gathered information on how to penetrate them. They purchased weapons, made contact with Islamic State agents in Syria, and started to plan a shooting attack in the Emek Valley and on the police. Sharif even traveled to Turkey to join ISIS before returning to Israel. The cell was created by Ahmed Abu Khalil Ahmed of Nazareth, who is currently serving a life sentence for his involvement in the 2009 murder of taxi driver Yafim Weinstein. Following today's ruling, Ahmed received an additional 2.5 years in prison. It has been cleared for publication that the former senior employee in the Prime Minister's office suspected of committing sexual offences is Gil Sheffer, formerly Chief of Staff in the Prime Minister's office. Sheffer is presently under house arrest on suspicion that he sexually abused an artist who performed at an event in which he participated. The woman claims that when she accepted a ride home, Sheffer plied her with alcohol, touched her inappropriately without consent, tried to kiss her and then took her to an unknown apartment to perform for his friends. Sheffer denies allegations which his lawyer insists are baseless. Jewish Home Chairman Naftali Bennett is urging women to file formal complaints with the police after meeting with a party MK being accused of sexual assault by a number of women. The legislator, who is yet to be publicly named, denies allegations. Jewish Home activist Hagit Moria Gabor says she has testimonies from at least 5 female victims so far, alleging crimes going back years. This is not the first time that the MK has been subjected to such allegations, with similar claims raised with the party leadership before the last election, according to reports that none of the women agreed to file a formal complaint with the police back then. Former IDF General Ofek Buchris, accused of rape and sexual assault, is negotiating a plea bargain with prosecutors to see rape charges dropped. Speaking to Army Radio, the attorney of one of the complainants said the indictment was proof that prosecutors had already accepted the complainant's version of events. The plea deal would require the agreement of both the complainants as well as Buchris, who denies all 16 charges against him, or else the case will return to the chief military prosecutors. Following reports of widespread use of date-rape drugs in Israeli clubs and bars, the Health Ministry will now bolster investigations by taking samples of complainants' hair follicles, where chemical evidence remains for up to half a year, whereas it washes out of the bloodstream within hours. The samples will be sent to a laboratory in Italy for examination. Tamar Zandberg, chair of the Knesset Committee Against Drugs and Alcohol, welcomed the move and stressed the need for heightened public awareness and effective enforcement to combat the use of date-rape drugs. Israel's new ambassador to Turkey, Eitan Naer, landed in Ankara this morning. Naer is leaving a posting as deputy ambassador in London to become Israel's first ambassador in Ankara since the downgrading of relations in 2011 over the Mavi Marmara crisis. Turkey is due to send its own ambassador, Erdogan's foreign policy advisor Kemal Okum, to Tel Aviv shortly. Upon returning to Turkey, where he served previously in the 1990s, Naer spoke briefly with the press.
We have a lot of work to do. I want to thank Turkey for the support, the aid that they sent to Israel, fighting the fires last week. We have a history of helping each other at times of need. And I'm looking forward to start work here officially.
Continuing his top-level appointments, US President-elect Donald Trump has now tapped 2 Wall Street insiders to fill key economic posts in his cabinet. Taking over as Treasury Secretary will be American Jewish financier Steven Mnuchin, who spent 17 years at Goldman Sachs and ran a hedge fund before serving as the finance chairman for the Trump campaign. Billionaire investor Wilbur Ross, also an early Trump supporter, will become Commerce Secretary. Mnuchin, whose resume includes financing such Hollywood movies as Avatar, says his main priority will be to spur US economic growth through tax cuts. Joining me now in the studio to discuss the latest political developments is IBA's political correspondent, Kalev Ben-David. Kalev, welcome.
Pleasure, Edlon.
We just heard news of yet another scandal concerning staff in the Prime Minister's office. At what point did these scandals with the staff become a political problem for the Prime Minister?
Well, first of all, we do have to note, along with all of the scandals and allegations, there's never been any charge directly made in any of these affairs against the Prime Minister or members of his family.
Of course.
There is a lot of smoke in the last few months here. I think one thing to keep in mind is, unlike Ehud Olmert, who had someone within his own party seen as a natural successor, Tzipi Livni, who raised the issue, Netanyahu isn't faced by that kind of challenge within the Likud. There's no clear successor to him as either Likud chairman or as the Prime Minister, and that has insulated him somewhat within his own party.
Perhaps as such allegations might destabilize a Prime Minister with weaker control over his party.
That's correct. I think if it is going to start hurting him politically, we're going to have to first see it among some of his coalition partners, who might say at a certain point this is getting a little out of hand. We haven't seen that yet, but I think that would be the sign to look for.
Efforts have been intensifying this week to find a compromise over Ramona to stave off the court-ordered eviction on Christmas Day. Insights on their prospects for success, perhaps?
I think in terms of preventing the evacuation of Ramona, it does not look like that's going to happen. Even I think we know that the Knesset vote on the regulations bill was delayed because clearly the current version is problematic to passing. I really don't see any compromise that's going to prevent the residents of Amona and certainly their more hardline supporters in the settlement movement from a violent resistance. Again, I think important though to note here is that Naftali Bennett, head of the Jewish Home Party, who's their primary supporter, has never stated that this is an issue that would force the Jewish Home to leave the coalition. He's been very careful to saying it. So I don't think that even a violent evacuation might lead to the breakup of the government or him leaving the party. But once these things get started, anything could happen. They could get out of hand. So that is a situation that could be very problematic for the Prime Minister later this month.
Turning north to another situation that might get out of control, out of hand, as you say. This week we saw the first ISIS attack on Israel from the Golan Heights, a reported Israeli airstrike against the Syrian arms convoy to Hezbollah, and of course Bashar al-Assad's forces advancing well into Aleppo. Are we in a decisive new stage on the northern front?
First of all, about that Islamic State attack, which, as you mentioned, was sort of unprecedented. Every security official, Israeli security official I've spoken with, have always stressed that Israel does not see Islamic State as a real strategic threat against Israel coming from the north. I mean, it's very similar to other terror groups that are also in the south, on Sinai, and that don't prevent a strategic threat. They have always stressed the real strategic threat from Syria still remains the Assad regime and its allies, Iran and Hezbollah. So that is the real concern. That really hasn't changed. I do think we have to, again, especially with the Trump administration coming in and have been very skeptical towards the prospect of the rebels, more accommodating maybe to the Russian presence. Israel's got to be very careful now to make sure that any arrangement that's reached to maybe resolve the Syrian civil war or Syrian rebellion does not create a permanent platform for Iran and Hezbollah in Syria. And that is something that really now we have to look at.
Kalev, over to the States, we just saw President-elect Donald Trump is making a few more appointments to his cabinet. Is he draining the swamp?
Well, it doesn't look like that because, as you said, these are real Wall Street insiders that work for Steven Mnuchin worked for Goldman Sachs, which he even has criticized during election. So I would say certainly some of his supporters have to look at the appointments he's making and question it. I do want to point out some very key appointments coming up for Israel. Of course, Secretary of State. We have to see Mitt Romney seems to have emerged as a leading candidate, someone who's very pro-Israel. The big name, Secretary of Defense, General James Mattis, who has made some very problematic comments about Israel in the past. So I think that the Secretary of Defense position, that's going to be a key appointment in Israel we have to look at.
Kalev, this is your last appearance here on IBA News as our political commentator. On behalf of the entire IBA team, we thank you and wish you the absolute best in your next stage.
Alon, thank you to you and all the IBA team, and thank you to all the IBA viewers. Thanks.
Thank you, Kalev. All the best. Energy Minister Yuval Steinitz expressed outrage today at remarks made by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas at a Fatah convention in Ramallah. Speaking with Israel Radio, Steinitz accused Abbas of being Israel's #1 enemy, threatening its existence. The minister's comments come in response to a speech delivered last night by Abbas, in which he vowed that Palestinian statehood is only a matter of time and that Israeli settlements will be removed, counselling patience among his people. Abbas further pledged that the Palestinians are here to stay, stressing what happened in 1948 will never happen again. Israel could soon launch a national project to document the heritage of Jews from Arab lands, if a proposal by Social Equality Minister Gila Gamliel is approved by the government. Gamliel announced the initiative at a ceremony last night to mark the exodus and expulsion of Jews from Arab lands in Iran, stressing the importance of integrating the history of Jews from Arab countries into the mainstream Jewish story. Minister Gamliel said the project would collect recorded and written testimonies from senior citizens with a preliminary budget of 10 million shekels for the first 2 years. The Knesset established the annual day for Mizrahi refugees in 2014, setting the date for the 30th of November to highlight the punitive measures taken by Arab regimes against their Jewish citizens in the wake of the UN partition vote on the 29th of November. Women of the Wall returned to the Kotel this morning for Rosh Chodesh Kislev with a twist. Prevented from bringing a Torah scroll into the plaza by extensive body searches, the women read the Torah portion from a piece of parchment instead, smuggled past the barricades. This morning's service comes just a week after the Reform Synagogue in Ra'anana was vandalized with hateful graffiti, and a death threat for Women of the Wall chairwoman Anat Hoffman and others left written on a knife outside. It also comes as Shas is pushing a bill to criminalize mixed-sex and non-Orthodox prayer practices at the Western Wall in an effort to stymie the establishment of a new egalitarian prayer plaza. Today's prayers were disrupted by noisy protesters, with many Haredi women blowing on whistles, but there was no repeat of last month's violence.
We were not allowed to bring in the Torah scroll, even though there are over 200 in the men's section. As far as the Rabbi Rabinovich, who's in charge of this area, is concerned, women are not supposed to read from Torah. We were vigorously checked, body checked at the entrance, but we continued with our prayer as we've done for the last 28 years, and with a lot of disturbance, unfortunately.
The Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem this week dedicated a new neurological centre, greatly enhancing emergency treatment in the capital. Funding for the project came from the Helmsley charity, which is quickly leaving its mark across the country. IBA's Ari O'Sullivan has more.
As the Queen of Mean, notorious for mistreating her employees, tenants, and even her family members. When the real estate mogul died, she notoriously left $12 million to her dog, Trouble. But thanks to Sandy Frankel, Helmsley's attorney and trustee of the Helmsley Charitable Trust, the dog, which he nicknamed Source, only got $2 million, and the rest was devoted to charity.
We actually had to go to court and argue the matter before a number of judges because a group of animal charities claimed that the money was designed to be left for animal charities. Ultimately, the judicial determination was that the trustees had and have complete discretion to do with the money as they wish.
Sandy Frankel, a soft-spoken, self-described Jewish guy from the Bronx, loves Israel. And as one of the 3 trustees overseeing the charity, he makes sure some of it is donated to the Jewish state.
When she passed away, she left virtually the entire estate to the trust. She named 5 trustees, two of whom are now deceased, so it's just 3 of us left, and she gave us complete discretion to do with the money for charitable purposes what we chose. Basically, she took a ton of gold, put it at our feet, and said, do good with it.
The new neurological center dedicated at Shaarei Tzedek received a $5 million grant from the Helmsley Trust. Its expertise will be treating victims of strokes, the 3rd biggest cause of death in Israel after cancer and heart disease, with at least 1 neurologist on duty at all times.
It will help the people in Jerusalem when trauma strikes, seconds rather than minutes are important. So to have a Trauma 1 Neurological Institute right in the middle of Jerusalem will save lives.
The Helmsley Fund has so far donated over $100 million in Israel. But what happens when Sandy Franco retires?
As far as the Israel program is concerned, I hope it goes on forever as well. I will be involved for as long as I am able to, and I hope that the program itself will have legs of its own and will continue.
While Leona Helmsley, who was Jewish, never visited Israel, the name is increasingly becoming synonymous, not with the Queen of Mean, whose money went to the dogs, but as a charity for public good. Aryeh O'Sullivan for IBA News.
Construction of a new blue line of the Jerusalem light rail will go ahead as planned after the municipality gave its final approval following public consultations. The 21-kilometre route will start in Ramot in the north and travel through the city centre, down King George and Keren HaYesod. It will then splinter at the Khan Theatre, with one route leading to Malcha through Emek Rephaim and the German colony, and another to Gilo. With a planned opening in 2025-2026, the new line will serve an estimated 250,000 passengers a day, with 45 trains operating at a frequency of 3 to 4 minutes at peak times. Jerusalem is also extending the existing red line from Mount Herzl to Hadassah in Karam, alongside another extension from the Hebrew University's Givat Ram campus to Mount Scopus. It is also planning a green line from Gilo to Mount Scopus. Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat said he hopes the blue light rail line will regenerate Emek Rephaim, reducing pollution and alleviating traffic. He added the municipality has learned its lessons from the construction of the present line and will strive to minimize disruption for Jerusalem residents. Over 1 million Google accounts have been breached with malware, with 13,000 penetrations a day. Israeli firm Check Point, which investigates security flaws in software, found that hackers had installed malware on Android devices after entering through fake apps that people had installed. The hackers then stole authentication tokens for Google accounts and hijacked them to download apps from the Google Play App Store, enabling them to fraudulently acquire advertising revenue. Check Point informed Google and says this is the internet giant's largest account breach to date. Concerned Android users can go to googlian.checkpoint.com to check whether their accounts have been compromised. Marine archaeologists have discovered an inscription carved onto a half-ton stone pillar in the ancient harbour of Tel Dor, which sheds new light on the Roman rule on the eve of the Bar Kokhba revolt 1900 years ago. The Greek inscription cites Gargilius Antiquus as the Roman governor over the province of Judea, just the second time that a Roman-era inscription has been found with the name Judea. Gargilius Antiquus, who ruled in 131 CE, was the last procurator of Judea, because the Romans erased the name Judea after the Bar Kokhba revolt was crushed 5 years later, renaming the area Syria Palestina. The stone is now on display at the library of the University of Haifa. In finance, the stock exchange is down today and the shekel is mixed. In weather, winter is here. It's snowing on Mount Hermon, with the first layer falling this afternoon. The Hermon ski site will be closed to visitors tomorrow, as will Rosh Hanikra. Winter weather conditions are expected throughout the country. Tomorrow will be cold and cloudy, with rain as far south as the northern Negev, and a risk of flash floods in the Judean desert and Dead Sea areas. Temperatures will rise slightly on Saturday, with a chance of light rain along the coast in the morning. Here's a look at the highs and lows. And that's all for today, leaving you now with the Hermon ski site preparing for the first snowfall of the season. It's a good evening, Shabbat Shalom, and Chodesh Tov from Jerusalem.